Stoicism is an interesting, therapeutic, and calming philosophy. It's a philosophy and way of living that's really greatly enriched my life and the lives of many people in history. And in this unit you'll be reading Epictetus' Enchiridion and excerpts from Aurelius' Meditations and Seneca's On Anger. To help you better understand these works and to write your paper on Stoicism, I'm going to give you this quick overview of 10 Stoic themes. And keep in mind that these themes overlap. They're not necessarily distinct from each other. The first and most important theme is to recognize what's under your control and what's not under your control, and don't worry about what's not under your control. Again, this is the most important Stoic theme. All other themes connect to it in some way. And to better understand this theme, take a look at this chart on the screen. Notice, as I go through it, notice that you cannot control the weather, but you can control your reaction to it. So will you make the most of the rainy day, or will you complain all day about it? Nor can you control your body, your physical body. Although you can choose to eat healthy and exercise and get plenty of rest, you cannot control your body's vulnerability. Eventually you will get sick and your body will die. You cannot control pleasure and pain, but you can choose to be virtuous even if it causes great physical pain. And this is because you have a mind. You can be the captain of your life even if it causes pain. You cannot control your property, like your house, your car, your jewelry. You can try to. You can lock them up, but there's no guarantee that a natural disaster or a thief won't take them away. Therefore, don't attach your identity or your happiness to your property. You are not your property, after all. Rather, you are the mind that chooses to identify or not identify with the property. You can control what others think of you a little bit to some degree, but ultimately another person's thinking is uncontrollable precisely because it's their thinking. So don't become a slave to what others think. Don't become a people pleaser. Don't lose your mind, the only thing that you can control, to the whims of others, which is something you cannot control. Death isn't really under our control either, though the time of death may be. So in short, don't worry about fame, reputation, death, or anything not under your control. Instead, recognize that only your soul is under your control, where your soul is your inner life of thoughts, reactions, emotions, and desires. Again, you cannot control external events, but you can control your reactions to them. Someone might say others can touch your body, but they cannot touch your soul unless you let them. So for the Stoic, it's permissible to try to manage the uncontrollable, but you shouldn't attach your identity or happiness to controlling the uncontrollable. So say to everything that you cannot control, say the following: I can be happy and good with or without you. My happiness and goodness is based on what I can control. The second theme of Stoicism is to conform your will to the divine order of the universe. So the Stoics believe that people should conform to this perfect order that permeates the universe. And sometimes this is translated as being satisfied with what you have instead of constantly seeking to fulfill new desires, thinking that they'll make you happy. Now some people criticize this Stoic theme because it seems to support passivity, to being content with what you have instead of working towards better goals or a better world. So the critic seems to think the Stoic is just too complacent, with the status quo especially. Or the Stoic is someone who's perfectly content to be fat, lazy, and live in a trailer down by the river, to quote Chris Farley. But I think a deeper meaning of a deeper reading of Stoicism supports the idea of contentment no matter what happens, not passivity. So Marcus Aurelius is a good example. He worked hard to make the world a better place, but he didn't base his happiness on the results, because the results are outside of his control. His efforts are in his control, but not the results. Here's another example. One of my students wants to be a professional athlete, and so he interpreted Aurelius' quotes on this theme as saying that he should try as hard as possible, but he shouldn't be devastated if he is unsuccessful at becoming an athlete. So he'll be content whether he's successful or not. He will be content with trying his best, something under his control, not with the uncontrollable outcome. So the Stoic just doesn't get upset or lose his mind when he fails to achieve his goals. Rather, he seeks his goals and is at peace no matter what the outcome is. And this theme also touches upon Stoic metaphysics. So for the most part, the Stoics were pantheists, and they believed that the universe was permeated with this fiery logos. And this universal fire is divine, And interestingly, every human has a spark of it within them. Since we cannot change this beautiful divine reality, we should live in harmony with it. That is, we should conform our desires to this reality rather than trying to make reality conform to our desires. Submitting to this reality will lead to peace of mind, happiness, and virtue for the Stoic. Okay, so let's take a look at theme 3. This is one of my favorite themes of Stoicism, what got me interested in studying them in the first place. And the theme says, understand your emotions, don't repress or assent to all emotions. So many people believe the Stoics are emotionless, but this just isn't true. Stoics seek to understand each emotion in order to give assent or dissent to that emotion. So for example, you may feel anger at the action of another person, but the anger dissipates if you realize that the other person is ignorant or that they did not intend the act. Here's another example. I may feel sad because I believe I'm either a complete success, a 100, or a complete failure, a 0. Now the Stoic could help me see this sadness is based on a false judgment, since I could be partially successful, a 70, between 0 and 100, or successful in some areas but not another. So the Stoic simply recognizes that emotions are based on beliefs, and many of our destructive emotions are based on false, unreal beliefs. Right? Now this type of cognitive therapy is one that many therapists still use today. And if you study Ellis's rational emotive behavioral therapy, which he created in the 20th century, you'll see, if you read about his biography, you'll see that he got many of his ideas from the Stoics. So there's a nice lineage there. Now, of course, the criticism is that some negative emotions may be caused by a chemical imbalance, right? And so this cognitive approach, Stoic approach, won't work. But I still think the Stoic or cognitive approach works for most people with destructive emotions, because most destructive emotions are based on false beliefs or unrealistic expectations. So in the end, the Stoics show far less emotion because they understand that most emotions are simply errors in judgment, and they have conditioned themselves to think about emotions before giving their assent to them. Their advice is to avoid becoming the emotion. Don't go with the flow. Rather, think about the thinking that created the emotion. And doing so will give you control over your negative emotions. The next one, the next theme, the fourth theme, is to do what's right no matter the cost. So Stoicism maintains that the only thing you can really control in this life is your soul, your mind, and the way to protect it is to live a life of virtue. So do the right thing even if it hurts, and don't complain of the hurt. According to Stoicism, your central focus in life should be conforming your mind to reality, and this leads to virtue, a recognition of duty. It leads to integrity. It leads to doing the right thing because it's the right thing. Conforming your mind takes time and effort. It's as if you're sculpting yourself. You're creating habits of thought and behavior that are realistic and therefore virtuous. So Stoic virtue is a form of training, just as a soldier or an athlete trains. Now I think one interesting thing about Stoicism is how important motive or intention is in Stoic ethics. I cannot control the outcome, but I can control my motive, so I should focus on acting from a good motive. They believe that you should do the right thing simply because it's right, not because it brings about happiness, not because it's in my short or long-term self-interest, not because God says it's right. You do what's right because it's right. And in this way, Stoic ethics is very similar to Kantian ethics. And you can see several quotes here. I think my favorite is Aurelius's. He says, "An emerald shines even if its worth is not spoken of." So if you are virtuous, maybe nobody recognizes it, nobody praises you, but there's still value there, just as an emerald shines even if its worth is not spoken of. The fifth theme of Stoicism is to understand that events are not problematic, rather it's your thinking that makes them problematic. So adjust your beliefs and expectations to fit reality. So one meaning of this theme is that life is just much more beautiful and happier and better when you prepare yourself for what will happen each day. So for example, prepare yourself. You will most likely encounter long lines, jerks cutting you off in traffic, ignorant people, selfish people, and so on. If you expect such things to happen, you won't be as angry or disturbed when they do happen. That is, you won't lose your mind. Remember, that's the only thing you can control, if you prepare your mind for reality. So, for example, consider how two different people may react to the same situation. Let's say they both step on a tack. The first person cries and screams and then complains about the tack all day long. But the second person steps on the tack, calmly removes it, and then forgets the event ever happened. Notice the difference between these two people lies in their thinking, not in what happened to them. The fact that the second person is not disturbed shows that much of our suffering comes from how we think, how we interpret events, not what happens to us externally. So perhaps Shakespeare was correct when he said there's no good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Of course, perhaps Shakespeare got this quote after, got this idea from reading Aurelius, Epictetus, or Seneca. Okay, the sixth theme is to live with compassion and respect for human rights. So I mentioned earlier that the Stoics believed in a universal, divine, pantheistic, and fiery logos, and that every human has a spark of this within them. So you can infer that we're all one blood, we're all one body. Every person we meet is intrinsically valuable. They're like a brother or sister to us, assuming you like your brother or sister. So as in Christianity, this Stoic mindset makes it possible to see everyone's humanity. It doesn't matter if you're Roman or foreigner, if you're a slave or an owner, a male or a female. Everyone is valuable, intrinsically valuable, and they possess rights too, because everyone has this divine fire, divine logos, divine spark within them. So the proper response to this worldview is compassion for all humans. It also creates humility, since it maintains that everyone is part of the fire that makes the whole. Everyone is part of God. So each of us is a piece of the puzzle, and this creates humility and appreciation for others as well. Each of us is intrinsically valuable, divine, and beautiful. So, in short, far from repressing emotion, the Stoic mind supports a strong sense of compassion, a grounded belief in human rights, and a strong sense of humility. And as a side note, it's interesting to compare Christianity and Stoicism. Both emphasize recognizing what's not in your control and not worrying about it, and both ask you to submit to something higher. And if you look at the Serenity Prayer on this page, you can see some of the similarities between Christianity, as exemplified by the Serenity Prayer, and Stoicism. You may want to pause the video here if you want to read that. Now, of course, there are also differences between Stoicism and Christianity. So the Stoic conception of God, when present, is usually more pantheistic, and most Stoics don't believe in an afterlife. Also, most Stoics were materialist, whereas modern Christians usually aren't. So it would make an interesting topic for a paper to further compare and contrast Stoicism and Christianity. The seventh theme is to cultivate right thinking through daily activities like meditation, premeditation, contemplation, reflecting, and journaling. The Stoics engage in all of these activities. So, for example, as you read the Stoics, you'll find that many of them ask you to meditate on your death, especially the decomposition of your physical body. And among the benefits of dwelling on your death are a greater appreciation for the present and a larger and more accurate perspective on life. So such a perspective will help me and you prioritize your desires, immunize yourself from stressing about trivial things. So also, thinking about the death of others can help you prioritize. So for example, remembering that my parents could die tomorrow makes me want to call them to enjoy the time we have together. So what the Stoic here is saying is not to dwell on death all day, right? And, some people with depression have that problem. Rather, it's to take 5 or 10 minutes to remember the big picture, to remember that you are mortal, finite, and so are your loved ones. And it'll help you stop and smell the roses if you do this each day. These Stoics also ask you to dwell on your worst case scenarios each day. So imagine that you won't get the job, that you will get sick, that your spouse will leave you, so on. Don't dwell on them all day. Just remember it's possible for 5 or 10 minutes a day. The purpose of these meditations isn't to depress you, but it's to help you be happier by adjusting your expectations and helping you be prepared. In the YouTube video, Seneca on anger illustrates this really well. But to give you an example, I won't lose my mind in anger if I prepare myself for long lines at the grocery store. So if I expect a line to be 20 minutes at the grocery store, and then I get there and it's only 10 minutes, I probably won't lose my mind in frustration or anger.